Today's headline is Bill Arp's letter. This article originally came from the Atlanta Constitution. It says, "Now you young people, girls and boys, excuse me for telling you a story about the old times. 64 years ago, when I was 12 years old, my father was the postmaster in our town and had to make contracts for carrying the mail to other neighboring towns. He gave these contracts to needy men, and the pay was generally $1 a day. One of these men got sick, and my father made me take his place and ride the mail to Roswell all winter. It was 25 miles away, and I had to ride there and back in a day, and he paid me the dollar for every trip. It was a bitter winter, and sometimes when I got home, I had to be helped off the horse, for I was frozen up and helpless. But I was a tough and hardy boy, and always ready for the next trip. On my first ride, the good old women on my route did not know me. They used to knit socks and send them to town by the old men to sell and carry back some coffee or sugar or indigo or copperas or some little thing. But they didn't know me, and I remember that one old woman came out to the gate and said, 'Are you the mail boy?' And I laughed and said, 'Yes, ma'am, I'm not a female boy.' She smiled and said, 'You are mighty little to carry bundles, but I would like for you to take a couple of pairs of socks and bring me back the pay and coffee if you will. I'll give you a little bag to put it in, and you could hang it on the horn of the saddle.' Of course I did, for I always like to oblige the women, and besides my father kept a store and got the trade. Sometimes I had as much outside of the mail bag as there was inside. I made 14 silver dollars that winter and felt rich. But I want to tell you about the mail business as it was then. There were no stamps or stamped envelopes, nor any other kind of envelopes. We wrote on a long paper called foolscap. It got that name from the watermark, which was a fool's cap and bells stamped on the paper. After writing, we could fold the sheet up to the size of a letter and slip one fold in the other, thumb paper fashion, then seal it with a wafer and address it. The wafers were round and thin, and were made of flour paste, and when held on the tongue a moment, got soft and sticky. In my young days, the postage was paid at the end of the line by the one who received the letter. It was 12.5 cents if it did not come or go outside of the state, 18 3/4 if from or to an adjoining state, and 25 cents if still farther off. But if it was to go to California, it had to be prepaid and sent by Wells and Fargo's Express and cost $1 and was a month on the way. Just think of it. Now it costs only 2 cents and takes only 4 days. That Overland Express almost made us boys crazy. They published a book called 10 Years Among the Mailbags, and it had pictures in it. Pictures of the boys riding the mail on Indian ponies, riding on a run of 10 miles in an hour, and then he was lifted off of his pony and put on a fresh one for another 10 miles. The boys had to weigh not less than 60, nor over 90 pounds, and had to make 40 miles a day, 20 east and 20 west. It took about 200 boys and 400 ponies to do the work, and I wanted to be one of the boys mighty bad. Part of the route was beset by hostile Indians, and the express company had to keep soldiers at these stations to guard the ponies, and the boys had to keep a sharp lookout between the stations. One of the pictures shows some Indians shooting at a boy as he bent over on the pony's neck and was flying like the wind. He had left the track and taken roundings on them, and I thought that was heroic. The letters were limited to a single sheet of paper and 1,000 to a bag, and that made about 20 pounds of mail. Besides the mail, there were some 2 pony hacks with 2 drivers and guns, and these carried gold dust from the mines to the eastern states and were limited to 200 pounds, which was worth nearly $50,000 and was a tempting prize to both white and Indian robbers. But the Gold Express ran at irregular intervals and nobody knew when it was coming. But now about postage. Not many foolish letters were written in those days. It cost too much and made the man mad when he had to pay 25 cents or 18 3/4 or 12.5 cents for it. The next one the writer would send would not be taken out and would go to Washington as a dead letter. I reckon you wonder why the postage was in such curious amounts. Well, we didn't have any decimal currency then, no dimes or half dimes. The dollar was divided into 16 parts instead of 20. One part was called a frip, which was 6 1/4 cents. Frip is an abbreviation for 3 pence. 2 parts was called a 7 pence, and its value was 12.5 cents. I don't believe I've seen a frip or a 7 pence in 50 years. The government called them all in and issued dimes and half dimes instead. In ruminating about the wonderful change in our postal laws since I was a boy, I am prepared to say that nothing that has been discovered or invented has wrought such beneficial results and so much comfort to the people. What pleasure at home is more valued than the reception of letters from kindred and friends who are far away? Postage is only 1/10 what it used to be, but there are 20 times as many letters written by every person who can write, and there are 10 times as many to write them. The Great Northern Mail used to come to our town once a week, and a single sack in the boot of a stage contained it. Now 5 times that quantity comes twice a day. I used to write about 2 letters a week, and now I write 25 or 30 and receive more than I write. For I have quit answering many letters that enclose no stamp. The number of letters increases faster than the postage decreases. When the postage had to be paid at the end of the line, it was pretty hard to receive a disagreeable letter and had to pay for it. My father was a merchant for nearly 50 years and sold goods on a year's time, and sometimes we had to write dunning letters to his customers. He wrote one to a very slow man and got no answer, so he wrote another, and the slow man wrote back that he would have to wait until he made another crop, and as postage was high and silver was scarce, he advised of very limited correspondence. He wrote another to a belated customer at Warsaw, and another, and then got a reply which said, "I have received your letters, but they were a long time on the way. If you had sent them round by Atlanta and Marietta and Roswell, I would have gotten them sooner, for we have 2 mails a week by that route, but only 1 by the way you send them. Hereafter, you had better send them that way. Our mail system is very imperfect. It takes 6 weeks for me to get a letter from Jack, who is in the Arkansas. You remember Jack, but I'm always glad to hear from you. Your friend, William Waters. P.S. As for that account of last year, which you say has run a long time, as the boys said to the molasses, just let her run. I wonder if our young people know who was our first Postmaster General. He was the Postmaster General before the Revolution and was turned out by King George because he was suspected of being a rebel, and his name was Benjamin Franklin. When the Declaration of Independence was passed, he established an independent line and boycotted the English system and afterwards organized a system of our own. Sir Rowland Hill was the Postmaster General of England and in 1734 established what was called the penny post. Before that, the English merchants hired men to carry their letters. When the Battle of the Waterloo was fought, the Rothschilds hired private carriers to bring them the news of the great battle. England credit in bonds and consols were then weighed down to 25 cents on the dollar, for Napoleon was just running roughshod over kingdoms and governments. The Rothschilds got the news of his defeat 24 hours sooner than the bankers of London, and they secretly bought up all the bonds and stocks and consols they could find. And when the good news came of the great victory, these bonds and stocks jumped up to par in a day, and the Rothschilds made many millions, and this was the beginning of their great fortune. It was a mean, dirty trick, but they didn't care. For nearly a century, they have controlled the finances of the civilized world, and nations cannot go to war without consulting the Rothschilds. But now they have to take a back seat, for Pierpont Morgan and Rockefeller and a few others can control more money than they can. But our postage has not yet got to the lowest notch. These people say it must be reduced to 1 cent, and a bill has been introduced in Congress to that effect, and letters will soon be delivered at almost every man's house if he lives on a public highway. Verily, it passeth comprehension. I received a letter in a paper this morning from Australia. They had come 12,000 miles for 6 cents and found me, although there are half a dozen Cartersvilles in the United States. There is no system so perfect as the postal system, and no man can steal from it without being caught. This article was written by Bill Arp. This story came from the great state of North Carolina, being reported in the Elm City Elevator of April 4th, 1902. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.